Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of a Shabbat learning session with TBA Rabbinic Intern Chayva Lehrman.
It's good to see everybody. My name is Chayva Lehrman. I am one of the interns here. You can ask me to pronounce my name however many times you'd like. I know that I have a difficult name, so Chayva is my name, and I'm excited to study together. Since tonight is the first night of Selichot, since we're observing Selichot here tonight, and or one of many nights of Selichot, depending on where your family comes from and what your practice is, I wanted tonight's study, or this afternoon's study, to focus on Piyyutim, because Piyyutim are really the heart and soul of the Selichot service, and there's something that we often sing and we often pray and we don't often study. So that's going to be our focus. So you can see where we're going on the source sheet, but I'd actually like you to lift your eyes off of the source sheet first, because there are three answers to this question on there, but there are many more than three answers to this question. So can somebody give me some Piyyutim, some common Piyyutim that you're acquainted with? And then we'll develop what our definition of Piyyutim is, a Piyyut is from there. Elitzion. El Adon. Yigdal. Adon Olam does count. Yes. So for those of you who have not heard this term, Piyyut or Piyyutim before, these are liturgical poems. You can hear that from some of the ones that are coming out. So we're getting that trend. Yigdal, Adon Olam. I said to someone on my way here, I commented, I'm teaching on Piyyutim, and they said, is that this week's Parsha? No, it is liturgical poems, and it is anything, here's a hint, if you're trying to come up with a few more, anything that you sing that has, say, a chorus and stanzas in the original Hebrew structure might be a Piyyut. So whether it's in services or in Shabbat Zmirot, Tal and Geshem are inserts into the liturgy. So those would not be, but think of like Adon Olam has this stanzas, something that has chunks of text, and then we repeat a chorus often. Or we repeat after a leader, we sing back to them. Unetane Tokef is a Piyyut.
Is Atamot?
Say that one again.
Atamot?
Atamut. I believe so. Yes. Yeah. Also, anything that you'd sing in, say, if you have ever been in a place where they sing Zmirot after dinner, Zmiras, Shabbos Zmiras, a lot of those are Piyyutim, right? So Menucha v'Simcha, Tzur Mishelo, Yaribon, Yom Shabbaton, Yom Ze L'Yisrael, Yom Ze Mechubad, Dror Yikra. And we often start our Kabbalat Shabbat with a Piyyut, which is Yedi Nefesh. So we have a few Piyyutim that we know from our daily and our Shabbos practice, and Unetane Tokef we've named as part of our High Holy Day practice. But I started all of this by saying that this is that Piyyutim are part of Selichot. Right, so Selichot Piyyutim vary whether we're going from Nusach Sfarad or Nusach Ashkenaz, if we're following the Sephardic tradition or the Ashkenazic tradition. But a Selichot Piyyut that's often that people might hear sometimes is Adon HaSelichot. If this is familiar to people, Adon HaSelichot. Yep. So we'll study that later. El Nora Alila that we sing in the Ela service at the end of all of our praying, that is also a Piyyut for the closing of the gates. Hayom Ta'amtzenu, another Piyyut that we sing often over the course of the Chagim. And then we have Piyyutim for other holidays as well. We have Adir Hu on Pesach. We have Ma'oz Tzur on Chanukah. So once you start looking for them, they pop up all over the place. Now you start realizing how common these are in our liturgy, even though they are technically extra liturgical, right? They are not part of our set matbeh. They're not part of our our ordered prayers that our brachot and our psalms that are usually what constitutes our tefillah, but they are in our tefillah nonetheless. So the root of the word Piyyut, it's a strange word, Pe Yud Vav Tet. And it actually comes from Greek. It comes from the word for poetry in Greek, at least according to the research of Ephraim Chazan at Bar Ilan. And it originally meant poetry in general. right? And the first Piyyutim that we find are kind of proto-Piyyutim that are referenced in Talmud, but we don't really see Piyyutim as we know them until we find one that Sadia Gaon references by a paitan. That is, a paitan is the person who sings or writes a Piyyut. The paitan, Yossi ben Yossi, is referenced in Sadia Gaon's writings and his Siddur. So we are starting to see Piyyutim pop up at least around the 8th or 9th century CE. And so let's see if we've settled around a definition of a Piyyut before we go any further. Can someone... So we know that we have a liturgical poem, that there's a structure, because we talked about stanzas or repeat after me style Piyyutim, and we know that there's religious significance to it. And then what is the final definition of a Piyyut that all of these things that we've talked about have in common? What is something that not in the content, but in the way that we experience a Piyyut? It's poetry, and not just poetry. Is it a poem you would find in a book? And just, any old poetry book and read it? No. It's meant to be sung. It's meant to be sung or chanted together, right? Piyyutim are beautiful poetry. I absolutely recommend reading them on your own just to revel in the way that they use the Hebrew. But but a Piyyut is something that we can sing together and come together around it. So that's part of why it's been so meaningful. But I'm going to turn it over to you. Why do you think that all these Piyyutim popping up all over the place, why did they go from being not a part of the liturgy when the liturgy was being set originally in Talmud, into being a very significant part of the liturgy, and then into other non-liturgical Jewish spaces as well? What made them so popular? What is it that a Piyyut gives us that maybe a bracha or a psalm doesn't? Thank you. So Ben said it gives us license to express ourselves in a way the liturgy might not be expressing. Yeah. And I'll add to that, it expresses our feeling in a language that might be, the language literally is Hebrew, but the way that something is framed might be from a different angle, from a different time, and could be more relatable, perhaps. Yes, AJ? Yeah, it makes it easier to remember when there's a scheme, when there's a structure, things that repeat, things we come back to. You always remember Lecha Dodi, right? You know that verse, or you know the chorus, because we're always going to come back to it. Joey? Right. Yeah, so some Piyyutim are alphabetical acrostics, and some Piyyutim are also acrostics by the name of the person who wrote them. Right? Right, Shlomo, yeah, because it was Lecha Dodi written by Shlomo Alkabetz, so he made sure that, we start the first verse with Shin for Shamor Vezachor, and the second with Lamed for Likrat. So Shlomo gets spelled out to make sure that we always know that he wrote it. Thanks, Shlomo. Also sometimes they are acrostics that are not the author's name, nor are alphabetical, like Yedid Nefesh. Yeah, yes, each paragraph spells out the tetragrammaton, each stanza of Yedid Nefesh starts with Yud, and then Hey, and then Vav, and then Hey. So with all of these reasons, all these things that Piyyutim had going for it, they really picked up. They became very popular around the 9th and 10th centuries, and you started singing them all over the place. There's one reason that's specific to this period that I will name that we haven't named yet, which is that sometimes Piyyutim helped Jews dodge persecution. There was we have writings from Samuel ibn Yahya al-Maghrib, which is, who was he converted to Islam from Judaism under the Persians, and he wrote how the Jews would sing Piyyutim because these were songs that incorporated pieces of their liturgy, but they weren't liturgy, and Jewish liturgy was banned at that time. So that way Jews could get together and pray without looking like they're praying. So now we're moving into an era like the Golden Age of Spain. So the Golden Age of Spain was a period in which Spain was ruled by the Islamic Empire, and Jews had a very specific status in Islamic law called dhimmi status. And dhimmi status allowed Jews to pray, so we didn't have that problem that we had with the Persians anymore, and also were in certain ways incorporated into society. There was a certain amount of assimilation. So you hear a lot of you hear this in the names of that time, right? So the Paitanim that we know from that period are Solomon ibn Gabirol, Moses ibn Ezra and Ibrahim ibn Ezra, Bachya ibn Yosef ibn Pakuda, all these ibns instead of Ben. So we know that there's a lot of Arabic in the culture, and also one of the things about our culture is that there's the musicality of the language and the structure of poetry is very popular as like a common, like think of instead of karaoke singing, we'd all get together just to listen to poets recite. So Piyyutim really rose into their own, and we started seeing different types of Piyyutim. The Piyyutim that we have for study today are also several types of Piyyutim. So there are some Piyyutim, some liturgical poems that give praise. Those are often like Pizmonim. There's also specifically praise for creation. So those are Yotzrot, and we'll see those peppered throughout our Rosh Hashanah liturgy. And then there are Selichot Piyyutim, right? And that's where we're going to land. So let's turn to the study sheet, except the study sheet's going to direct you to the Siddur. So let's turn to page 23. And I want you to look at Lecha Dodi with new eyes. It has many things that we know so well, that we sing so well. We think about all the melodies that we can apply to Lecha Dodi. But I want you to first look at it and say, okay, what is the structure here that reflects some of the things that we've been learning about Piyyutim, their history? Where does it fit theologically, perhaps, is one way to think about it? How is the poem structured? What stands out to you? Take a moment and read through on page 23 of Lev Shalom. Mm-hmm. Tell me your name. Sorry. Chaim. Thank you. So just for the people on Zoom, I'll repeat some of what you said. And I think we have a microphone we can start. There was one right here. It looks like it's disappeared, but we can pass this one. But Chaim was saying that it expresses a yearning for oneness with God in a very mystical way that is not exactly what it says in the liturgy, but expresses the essence of it in a way that would be outside of the liturgy. Yeah. Fortunately, Lecha Dodi didn't need to be a tool for dodging persecution, at least not at the moment it was created, because it was from the 15th century in Sfat, so Jews were able to pray. But it is absolutely those things that would add a new flavor. Yeah.
I'm noticing two things. One is sort of a setting up of a pattern and then the breaking of the pattern at every verse. So the first verse, for example, ends in chad, and then ilah. And the next one goes lecha, racha, sucha, chila. And then lucha, fecha, bacha, mela. So there's this breaking of the pattern every verse. And I think about the content of the verses and how the latter half is the preponderance of references to Second Isaiah, and this sort of sense of going from, it's sort of like history of Shabbat being with us, and then the hope for it to take us home.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
The focus. There we go. Now it's on. Even the first line, Shamor v'Zachor, referencing Shabbat, the unification of Shabbat, and the two different words in the Aseret HaDibrot and the Ten Commandments describing what we do for Shabbat, and dealing with the Shabbat bride and the Kabbalists in Tzfat reviewing this as a marriage of being connecting with God in that way. So it's these Piyyutim, and this Piyyut in particular is one that was very popular with its poetry and its focus on God and its focus on Shabbat, and dancing out into the fields beforehand to bring in the Sabbath bride.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Do you want to pass this down? I think Yael and AJ had hands. Did I see hands? No? Okay. Yes, please.
So typically where it is in the service and the way we sing it, it's typically a very uplifting, you kind of want to rise up. But if you look at the content, it starts as a downer, right? You're always just like, don't be so downtrodden, come on up. And which usually if you want to be uplifted, you don't start from there. You know, you don't just say, don't get out of the dregs, right? It's like a reminder and so it has that two-sidedness to it. I'm not sure why, and certainly we tend to ignore that as we sing it and as we think about it, and especially at that moment in the service.
Yeah, and I would not claim to have one answer why, the entire answer why, but I think one answer might be that it acknowledges something very, very human, right? That we sometimes also find in Psalms where there are juxtapositions put together that allow us to encompass more of life in that prayer, in that feeling. It's more honest when we can hold both the bad and the good, or we can start looking for redemption from a low place, and we don't need to pretend like we're fine.
Yeah, in the modern world, I think we tend to be we want warm and fuzzy all the time, and I think maybe at the time this was done, they were more realistic.
That realism is good for us. Let's move on to Adon HaSlichot. So Lechadodi is our gateway piyut. It gets us going because we know it so well. It's good to look at it again. But Adon HaSlichot is also particularly a Sephardic piyut. And so will we be singing this tonight? I'm not sure. Perhaps. We might be singing this tonight. We might be. And, if you don't sing it tonight, you can certainly find an opportunity over the next week and then again in the 10 days after that to sing it. It's a beautiful, beautiful piyut. It really can bring you up. So I invite you to take a look at it on the source sheet on page 2. And the melody goes like this. Adon Selichot bochen levavot goleh amukot dover tzedakot chatanu lefanecha rachem aleinu chatanu lefanecha I wish we had time to sing the whole thing, but we do need to get to Ma'ariv at some point. So I invite you to just take a moment to read quietly the rest of Adon HaSlichot and think about how this might retain some of those features of Piyyutim, but also let's think of it a little bit more deeply, a little more personally. What would this give voice for you in this season? Mm-hmm. Can you, Daniel, let's pass the mic down. Yeah.
For those online, I'll repeat myself. I don't know what else to say that's not written here, but what I can get from this is that just exactly what it says here is that we're starting that time there where we ask for forgiveness for the things we did that were wrong, whether to God or to other people. So this is a good time to reflect on and it's a good time to set goals for yourself for the coming year, such as like self-awareness of how your words or actions come across to others. It's hard for me to speak when I'm on the spot, but yeah.
No, thank you. That's great. Appreciate that.
It strikes me that all the descriptions of God are benevolent and kind and understanding and comforting. And the only reference to wrongdoing is the chorus. And I think about this setting a mood of we're entering a season where we're encountering the sovereign of all things, and yet this sovereign of all things is totally different, wholly different from any ruler of flesh and blood that we've encountered, where we apologize to a human being because we're afraid they're going to hurt us back, or we're afraid that some other bad thing may happen. But God doesn't do that. God is Adon HaSlichot, Bochen Levavot, Hadur V'Niflaot, all these wonderful things. And so there's a sort of hopefulness of this piyut that I think we lose sight of when we are in the throes of high holidays sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's in the plural. It doesn't seem to be a personal reflect. it just struck me that it was in the plural and we're going to sing it together. And I don't know if that means it's easier to admit that you've sinned when saying we all have, or we're focusing on the communal sins, or whatever that means. But it's not a personal, it doesn't seem to me to be a personal.
I respectfully dissent. It's the chorus, the pismon, that is that we have sinned, but it's the paragraphs themselves are focused on an individual approach, and then they say at the end, all of us have done it, and that's what we even say, Ashamnu, Bagadnu, in terms of that communal prayer, and that's taking place. But I view it as a personal acknowledgement of what's taking place, and the bottom line is, yes, we have all sinned before you, and have mercy upon us.
So one of the testaments to the power of poetry in Piyyutim is that they've made a resurgence as part of Israeli popular music. There's a song called Elohai by Kobi Oz, where he plays actual track of his grandfather, his Iraqi Paytan grandfather, singing a piyut, and then Kobi Oz's music that he lays on top of that is him wrestling with his sense of God. Right, there's another example that's actually very specific to the season, where Tal Peled and Yanai do a duet on Kamti Be'ashmoret. And it's beautiful, and it's hip hop. But the hook of the hip hop is Kamti Be'ashmoret. So it's really and they speak to that theme, right? They don't pick this for nothing. And so there are modern Piyyutim. I would say perhaps a modern Paytan might be Leonard Cohen with Who by Fire, right? There are ways in which every era of Jews have found their way to make poetry about our beliefs, about our traditions, and about what we struggle with when we sit in that. And the question is next, like, what will our Piyyutim be, and who will our Paytanim be? And how and where and when do we want to incorporate that into our Jewish practice, whether it's in our liturgy or in our home practice or wherever we go, where it gives voice to something that we need to say, and it lets us sing it in a way that touches our kishkas and elevates our prayer.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.